Hello, hello. Let's move on to 4.7 and talk about solar radiation and the Earth's seasons. This is going to be short and sweet. If I can click there we go. This is just a fun little graphic of where to live based on your temperature preferences. You probably can't see it all that well, but if you just Google where to live based on your temperature preferences, you'll get this image popping up. And it's just interesting to see and compare the different major cities as far as their temperature. It's just fun. All right, so I have a question for you here on this slide. How many ways does the Earth move? And we're not talking about plate tectonics. We're talking about the whole entire Earth as one big piece. Let's think about it for a second. The answer to that question is 3. The Earth moves in 3 different ways, and that relates to solar radiation and the seasons, which is what this video is about. So the different factors that affect the amount of solar radiation that Earth receives, which has to do with how the Earth moves, is rotation. We make one rotation every 24 hours. That's what 1 over 24 means. So rotation, otherwise known as spinning on its axis. So that's one way the Earth moves. And obviously, that's going to affect daytime, nighttime. So that's going to have our solar radiation vary. Another way that the Earth moves is by revolution around the sun. And we make one revolution every year, or 365 days. Unless it's a leap year, then it's 366. And obviously, our distance from the sun will have an impact on the amount of solar radiation that is being received. And then the third way the Earth moves is by having a tilt on its axis, either being tilted towards the sun or being tilted away from the sun. And that angle of tilt is 23.5 degrees. I don't think it's important that you know that number, but just in case you wanted to know. And I do have one last thing on here, the atmospheric conditions, which have nothing to do with the Earth moving, like in terms of this question, but the atmospheric conditions will also affect the amount of sunlight that reaches the surface of the Earth. Obviously, on a cloudy day, less sunlight will reach the Earth. But we're going to be focusing on the first 3 things in this little video. So we're talking about seasonality. What causes the seasons? Now here in South Florida, we don't really have seasons in terms of like winter, spring, summer, fall. We have more of a wet season and a dry season, or that's about it. But seasonality is caused by the tilt of the Earth. When the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, that's summertime. When it's summertime, we have longer daylight hours. The sun is higher up in the sky, and that's when we have most direct sunlight hitting the Earth. And it's the opposite in the southern hemisphere. Southern hemisphere has their summer in what we typically call our winter months. The southern hemisphere experiences summer in the months of like November, December, January, February, because at that point the southern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun. So that's what seasonality is. Just depends on whether the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun or tilted away from the sun. That's all. The seasons not affected by the distance from the sun, because altogether I know we move in an elliptical orbit, but seasonality is determined by the angle that the Earth is at. And that's what you're seeing here. In the left diagram, you can see the more direct sunlight hitting the southern hemisphere, because in the left diagram, the southern hemisphere is tilted more towards the sun. And then the opposite is happening in the right diagram. It's not that confusing. I have this video on Canvas for you. I'm not going to play it on here. Everybody loves Bill Nye. And then just to kind of recap the difference between weather and climate on here. Weather is short term. very short term. Weather can change in a matter of minutes. So short-term atmospheric conditions for a particular area. Things like temperature, pressure, moisture content, cloud cover, barometric, I already did pressure, wind direction, all part of a weather pattern. It changes all the time. Whereas climate is measured over long periods of time. We're talking many, many decades. We're looking at patterns when we're talking about climate. The patterns usually of temperature and precipitation. So compare the two diagrams at the bottom. Weather is constantly changing, climate not so much. And a great quote by Mark Twain. Climate is what we get. Climate is what we expect. Weather is what we end up getting. And that's it. Like I said, quick and easy. That's all for now.